The United Nations Special Envoy Hans Grunberg concludes visit to Yemen. Heads of mission of the Permanent Five in Yemen stress that escalation in Marib must end now. Save the Children organization says Yemeni teachers starve as they have no regular pay. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Rana Swaylam. The UN Special Envoy for Yemen, Hans Grunberg, concluded a 3-day visit to Taiz. He discussed the need to end the conflict in Yemen and the need for comprehensive solutions and inclusive political dialogue. The UN diplomat called for all stakeholders to engage in constructive discussions on political, military and economic issues that could lift Yemenis out of the current horrible reality. The UN envoy Hans Grunberg has started intensive diplomacy in the region and inside Yemen. All of these efforts aim at ending the war and reaching a sustainable peaceful agreement. More insights on the recent diplomatic efforts of the UN envoy are within the following report.
Amid intense battles in south and west of Marib Governorate, United Nations envoy Hans Grunberg entered his second visit to Yemen. Grunberg briefed the Prime Minister on results of his recent regional visits and the international consensus on the need to stop escalation, especially in Marib. The UN envoy expressed concern over recent developments that do not help achieve peace, stressing the need to focus on urgent matters to alleviate the suffering of the Yemeni people. In his 3-day visit to Taiz, he stressed that working for peace in Yemen is an uphill battle. He reassured that Yemenis must not forget that there is always a way to break cycle of violence and that there are always opportunities for a peaceful dialogue. He affirmed that he is working underway on political and economic tracks, stressing on the need to focus on urgent matters to alleviate the suffering of the Yemeni people. From Makha, Grunberg met with the local authority, Brigadier Tariq Saleh and Al-Hirak al-Tahami, who highlighted the need for de-escalation, inclusivity and the functioning of state institutions. These visits have given me a first-hand experience of the impact of the conflict on civilians in Taiz, including difficulties they face moving through their daily lives. It has also given me the opportunity to hear directly from Yemeni men, women and young people on how an UN-led political process can help to address the situation in Taiz as part of a sustainable solution to the conflict in Yemen. Mr. Grunberg said the UN envoy focused on pushing for a cessation of hostilities in Marib. According to experts familiar with the Yemeni file, Grunberg is set to propose before the UN Security Council an initial ceasefire plan, followed by continued efforts to reach a comprehensive ceasefire agreement and return to the political track. On the contrary, Yemenis hope that the Swedish diplomat endeavors would be translated into reality on the ground, unlike previous agreements that Houthis dodged in a way or another, leaving Yemenis pay the highest cost of war.
In Riyadh, the P5 heads of mission met Ambassador of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to Yemen. In the meeting, they discussed support for current efforts of UN Special Envoy and the need for a UN-brokered deal. The P5 heads of missions stressed the need for immediate end of offensives in Marib, while calling on all Yemeni parties to engage in a real dialogue to end the crisis in Yemen. The UN Security Council is set to hold a closed session on Yemen today. During this session, Hans Grunberg is expected to brief the Council on the outcomes of his visits to the region and Yemen. David Gressley, the humanitarian coordinator, will also brief the Security Council on the humanitarian situation in the country. The government of the United Kingdom said that Houthis need to engage constructively on negotiations. British Minister for the Middle East and North Africa, James Cleverly, said that UK achieved international agreement to impose sanctions against Houthi military leaders Mohammed al-Ghammari and Yusuf al-Madani for leading Houthi offensives throughout Yemen, particularly in Marib, and for orchestrating cross-border attacks against Saudi Arabia. Saleh al-Shari used his position to seize assets of opponents and bypass the UN arms embargo. Cleverly stressed that dialogue is the only way to end the conflict and alleviate crisis in Yemen. Million Human Rights Organization welcomed the UN sanctions on 3 Houthi rebel senior leaders. According to the organization, Yusuf al-Madani and Muhammad al-Ghammari are prominent Houthi leaders accused of recruiting children. The organization urged the Security Council to do the same with the remaining prominent Houthi leaders involved in war crimes, especially with regards to children's recruitment. Moving to Ma'rib, the deputy governor discussed with the head of Red Cross delegation in Yemen the humanitarian situation of the southern districts. The head of the Red Cross mission, Katrina Ritz, indicated that the Red Cross office in Ma'rib will increase and diversify its upcoming humanitarian relief interventions and provide cash assistance and necessary protection programs for displaced, to improving their living conditions and alleviating their suffering. Turning to Ma'rib, the deputy governor met with the United Nations humanitarian coordinator in Yemen, David Gressly. They discussed the ongoing Houthi escalation on Ma'rib and its impact on people's life. David Gressly said his visit to Ma'rib is to evaluate the humanitarian situation in the city and report it to the members of the UN Security Council. More than half of Yemen's teacher and education personnel, or about 190,000 people, have been forced to find second sources of income to feed themselves and their families, including on-street work, as they haven't received regular pay since 2016. Save the Children Education Advisor Chiara Moroni said that continued disruptions in the pay of teachers and educational personnel will have a critical impact on the education process and would expedite its collapse, harming not only millions of children today, but also the future of the country. More than 2.2 million children are now out of school in Yemen after 7 years of conflict, and about 8 million require educational assistance. More on the story of education under difficult circumstances is in the following report.
A human being getting an education is one of the most important life necessities, yet this has become a major crisis in Yemen, facing all ages. Access to a quality education is a right of every child, including displaced children and people with special needs. The war in Yemen has caused severe consequences on aspects of children's lives. When children are not in school, the consequences are dire, both for their present and their futures. Now education in Yemen is being filled with the Houthi ideology. Houthis did not only destroy the country, they also interfered in filling the educational curriculums with their rebellion ideology. According to a UNICEF report, more than 2 million children, boys and girls, of school age are out of school due to poverty, conflict, and lack of educational opportunities. Poor little girls are forced into early marriage instead of being in school and getting an education. On the other hand, boys are being recruited into fighting with Houthis. Children who do not finish their education are trapped in a cycle of poverty. If out-of-school children or those who have dropped out recently are not properly supported, they may never return to school. It does not only stop with students, as 2/3 of the teachers in Yemen, over 170,000 teachers in total, have not received a regular salary for more than 4 years because of the conflict. This puts around 4 million additional children at risk of disrupted education or dropping out as unpaid teachers quit teaching to find other ways of providing for their families. The combined effects of the prolonged conflict and the latest assault on education in the form of COVID-19 pandemic will have devastating and long-lasting effects on the learning as well as the mental and physical well-being of children and adolescents in Yemen. The Houthi attacks on schools must stop, as there have been 231 since March 2015. There has to be a solution from the concerned authorities, like ensuring teachers to get a regular income so that children can continue to learn and grow, and for international donors to support educational programs with long-term funding.
To Hodeidah, the joint forces defeated an infiltration attempt by Houthi militia in Al Jabaliyah area of Al Tuhayta. A military source said that joint forces monitored movements and attempted infiltration of Houthi militia members, inflicting death and injuries on them and destroying their equipment and weapons, while the rest of them fled. Turning to Marib, the government forces regained military positions in Harib front south of the city. Military sources reported that a group of Houthi rebels were lured into a tight ambush, killing more than 17 members. Military sources added that the coalition jets launched several air raids targeting Houthi militia in separate locations south of Marib, destroying a tank, vehicle, and 3 crews. Saada, the government forces deterred Houthi infiltrations on Safra district. According to sources, Houthi infiltrations were monitored in Wadi Ar and stopped at once. Coming next. Wide-scale international condemnation of the killing of a pregnant journalist.
شيء هذا هو محل استهداف الحواث الذين استهدفوا المواطنين وهم نائمين. هذا هو الصاروخ في الساعة 4 ماشينا الضربة من الحوثيين في المخيم. هذا يعني استشهدوا أولاد عمي، هذا استشهدوا يعني أخواني كلهم يعني شوف يعني الدم في الخيم. الدم في الخيم يعني في كل مكان، يعني رؤوسهم ما التقوش، الرأس ما التقاش، الرأس ما التقاش.
The attack targeting couple journalists in Aden, which resulted in the killing of a pregnant woman, Rasha al-Harazi, and injuring her husband, received wide international condemnation. The UN Special Envoy condemned the assassination crime, offered condolences to the journalist's family, and stressed that journalists everywhere must be able to work without fear. Likewise, UNESCO condemned the attack. Further, UK Ambassador to Yemen Richard Oppenheim condemned the tragic attack and stressed that journalists should never be a target of violence. The tragic killing of the pregnant journalist Rasha al-Harazi has shaken the entire world. Nobody has ever imagined the brutality of criminals who have plotted such inhuman act. More details on this sad accident are within this report.
Rasha Abdullah al-Harazi is a TV journalist that was killed and her husband was injured seriously. Rasha lost her fetus as she was pregnant when she was killed in a car explosion in Aden. Witnesses and medical sources said in the latest incident of violence in Yemen's southern port city, they saw the incident of the journalist's car exploding. A police investigation indicated an explosive device was planted on the vehicle carrying Rasha Abdullah and her husband. Her husband is a 27-year-old man who is also a journalist and worked with a number of local and regional media outlets. The two journalists have a 2-year-old child apart from the fetus they sadly lost in this explosion. Sources said they both worked for a Gulf-based television channel. This is not the first terrorist attack in Aden, as last October, a car bomb targeted the convoy of Aden's governor, which killed at least 6 people, and 12 civilians were killed in a blast near the city's airport. Yemeni journalists have been among the casualties of the conflict, as last year Nabil Hassan al-Qaiti, which is a Yemeni journalist, was gunned down and also killed in Aden. The 34-year-old videographer and photographer, who also worked for other major news organizations in the region, was shot in his car by unknown attackers shortly after leaving his home. The terrorist attacks against Yemeni journalists is non-stop. Houthis keep causing terror to Yemenis without leaving them to live a normal and peaceful life.
Yemen stressed the importance of uniting efforts on climate change and the Paris Agreement. This came in Yemen's speech during the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Glasgow. Minister of Water and Environment Tawfiq al-Shargabi warned that major parts of Aden will be flooded with seawater in case the sea level rises as a result of climate change, stressing the need to support adaptation programs with climate change within the framework. The Yemeni rial has witnessed historic collapse due to the ongoing war. People cannot afford buying basic commodities because of the incredible high prices. This has made it hard for them to cope in such terrible situation. More on this story is within this report.
Where the Yemeni rial is heading to? The answer to the question lies within the conflict that escalated about 6 years ago, specifically with Houthis rebels controlling the capital Sana'a. Since then, the rial was not stable. It fluctuated into an upward surge against the US dollar, upping from 214 to a historic 1,000 against the greenback. Economists link the current fall of the rial to the political instability that engulfs the country, along with the failure to resume oil exports and to collect revenues from the state bodies. To help recover the rial, the Yemeni government replaced the central bank governors, shut down exchange firms to put an end to the currency speculation, and provided local traders with a dollar. Also, the government floated the rial to bridge the gap between the official rate and that in the black market, and relocated the central bank headquarters from Sana'a to Aden. This, however, was not enough, with the Houthis rebels banning the use of new banknotes printed by the Yemeni government in Aden and refusing to deposit revenues from Hodeidah seaport and taxes into the central bank in Aden. Now what's next? The Yemeni rial, according to experts, is doomed to plunge more, with pricing skyrocketing as inflation increases. People in Yemen will find it hard to pay for basic food and services, which could spark protests nationwide.
2 al-Dala angry rallies stormed the city, denouncing failure of government policies to alleviate suffering of Yemenis. People took to the streets, chanting angry slogans, demanding need to stop collapse of the currency and restore services. Demonstrators called on the international community to intervene and save people in Yemen. The National Committee Against Coronavirus announced 5 new cases of the COVID-19 in 2 governorates. Committee officials said on Twitter that 4 cases were recorded in Hadramaut and 1 in Taiz. Also, 2 deaths were recorded, plus 17 recovered cases. With the current updates, the total confirmed cases are 9,907, including 1,920 deaths and 6,612 cases of recovery. Here's a reminder of the main headlines. The United Nations Special Envoy Hans Grunberg concludes visit to Yemen. Heads of mission of the Permanent 5 in Yemen stressed that escalation in Marib must end now. Save the Children organization says Yemeni teachers starve as they have no regular pay. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.